Well, good morning again, and welcome to Community Christian Church. My name is Ryan. I'm the student pastor here at CCC. You know, in 2001, a movie came out that eventually led to a series of 4 movies. It had action and adventure. It had comedy and style. It had this star-studded cast, headlined by George Clooney, Brad Pitt, Matt Damon, Julia Roberts, the late Bernie Mac, and just so many others. That's right, I'm talking about Ocean's 11. Has anybody ever seen Ocean's 11 or any movie in the franchise? If you haven't, it's a pretty easy premise. George Clooney plays Danny Ocean, and Danny has this mission in the very first movie to rob a bank. So he gathers together 10 of the best thieves and criminals he knows, and they devise this intricate plan for how they're going to get into, rob, and get out of the casino again. It's entertaining for sure. If you've never checked it out, it's worth a watch. I don't know this for sure, but I think the whole series was based on this one moment from my life when I was in 7th grade. So I grew up in a pretty large suburban neighborhood in Pennsylvania, and there were a ton of families with kids. And I have great memories growing up in that neighborhood. I can remember coming home from school and dropping my stuff off, and I would be out all night as long as I was home before the sun set. And I wasn't the only kid like that. Our neighborhood was full of them. We had so many kids in our neighborhood that we formed these little groups. We called them gangs. We didn't really do any gang stuff, but we'd kind of compete with each other throughout the neighborhood. We'd play all these different games. We would play tackle football with our groups. We'd build forts and have these massive water balloon fights in the woods. But I think one of our favorite games to play were these big capture the flag battles. And we play late into the evening. And these games would take place in this central part of our neighborhood where yards would back up together and all the games would happen there. And one summer we decided to take it a little step further. Whatever team won one of those games would take the bikes from the other kids and hold them hostage until you won again. And as a 12-year-old boy, my bike was like my prized possession. It's how I got around. I mean, I had a pretty cool bike. It was this red and white BMX, kind of like this one right here. I mean, I was riding in style. It was cool. I was cool. And this one particular summer, my group lost one of these epic capture the flag games. We had to give up our bikes to the other group, and it was a bummer for sure. Now, here's the thing. Our bikes just so happened to be in the yard next to my friend Todd's house. We could literally see our bikes every time we hung out. It was torture. They were in this fence behind a gate locked, and we couldn't get to them. And we weren't going to wait until the next time we played to win to get our bikes back. So we put together a plan. And this is where I think they got the idea for the series. Every one of us had a role. We each knew our jobs. We spent about a week preparing for this thing. Everything was figured out down to the smallest detail. Well, later in the week, I'm at home eating dinner, and the phone rings. I go to the kitchen, pick up the phone, and pull up the antenna because it's the 90s. And my friend Todd says it's go time. So I remember racing through the yards to get to Todd's house, pull open his front door, ran up the stairs to Todd's bedroom. And there in Todd's room is our group, our gang, gathered around the window. And in Todd's window was his little brother, Corey. Now, Corey's about 5 or 6 at the time. And tied around Corey's waist was a rope. And tied around that rope was a bed sheet. See, we had thought about everything. Our plan was simple but ingenious. We would push Corey out of the 2nd floor window. And just like we've seen in so many movies, that bed sheet would open like a parachute. And Corey would glide safely into the next yard, unlatch the gate. We'd get our bikes back. Victory would be ours. The heist of the century. What could go wrong, right? So we counted down from 3. And on 1, we pushed Corey out the window. And for a split second, we were geniuses. For a split second, we believed people would tell our story for generations. But then we remember gravity existed. And Corey fell like a rock into the flower bed below. We ran back down the stairs about as fast as I came up out to the flower bed to find Corey, and not far behind us was Corey and Todd's mom, finding Corey's arm bending in a direction that it should not bend. Needless to say, we did not get our bikes back that day. Even if we did, I don't know if it would have mattered the rest of the summer. See, that week in 7th grade, we had a clear goal. We knew exactly what we wanted to do. We had a plan, and we were all in. We had a mission. And for that week, that mission changed how we lived and we thought and what we did. For a week, there were a bunch of Danny Oceans running around my neighborhood with the most important mission. And at some point, we have all had a mission, something that determines how you live. To get the job, to make the team, to get into that school, to get that guy or girl. A mission has a way of focusing your life, or at least a season of your life. Everything else you do aligns behind that mission. What you believe your mission is determines how you live. And for the past few weeks, we've been in a series, we've been looking at these different characteristics, these different parts of the life of Jesus, and they have a direct impact on how we live. And today, we're going to talk about the mission of Jesus. After Jesus died and was resurrected, which we celebrated a few weeks ago at Easter, he spent 40 days on earth interacting and talking with people. At the end of those 40 days, he had one more opportunity before he went back into heaven to talk to those people that were closest to him. And he could have said anything. I mean, imagine all of the knowledge that Jesus held. All those questions that have kept you up at night, he could have answered those. But he chose to give them and to give us a mission. Check out what Jesus says in the book of Matthew in the 20th chapter, starting in verse 18. Then Jesus came to them and said, "All authority on heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you, and surely I am with you always to the very end of the age." This was it. This was the last thing Jesus says on earth before he ascends back into heaven. And he could have said anything, and he chose to give them a mission. And some of you may have heard this mission before. It's a pretty familiar verse if you've been around the church. It's referred to as the Great Commission. And we need to understand, it's not just a suggestion. This wasn't just for show. Jesus didn't flippantly throw it out there because there was some awkward pause in the conversation. And this mission, it's not just for pastors. It's not just for people on stage or people with a platform. The mission was and is for all followers of Jesus. And it matters. This isn't about a program or a clever strategy for church growth. It's about people, real people, people in your life right now who are searching and hurting and trying to figure out purpose and meaning. People who are far from God, whether they realize it or not. And the reality is, eternity is at stake. The mission of Jesus isn't small. It is about eternity. And Jesus chose us to be a part of that. He didn't have to, but he did. He placed you where you are, your neighborhood, your job, your team, your family, for a reason. That's why this matters. Because the mission comes with eternal weight, and God, in his grace, invited you into it. So if we break down this mission, it starts with a simple instruction: to go. It's a verb. It's a very simple verb. It means to move from one place to the other, to not be stagnant, to not sit still. The very beginning of the mission of Jesus is simple. It calls us to action, to go. It assumes that following him, accepting the mission that he gives us, it won't be passive. From the very first word, Jesus is making it clear that the mission is not to be something that we sit with. It is to be something that we step into. It requires movement and trusting that he is already ahead of us. But that cuts against everything in our culture. We are experts at building comfortable lives. Restructure our days, our homes, our relationships around convenience and security. The goal becomes get as comfortable as possible and then stay that way. And yet Jesus looks at his group of ordinary people and he says, don't stay, go. The mission of Jesus has never advanced through people who sat still. It has always moved forward through people who are willing to go. Comfort might feel safe, but it was never the mission. You know, in the 1950s, President Lyndon B. Johnson thought that kids were too lazy. So he started a presidential fitness test. It was all about getting kids to move. I remember doing this in the 90s. I specifically remember the sit and reach portion of the test. Anybody else? In my gym class, I was a sit and reach all-star. I could sit and reach further than anybody at Lansdale Elementary School. And if I'm honest now, I can still sit and reach pretty well. But the mission isn't some kind of biblical fitness test. Jesus didn't think we were lazy. He wasn't asking us to move because we were lazy. Jesus gives us this mission to go, not just to be active, but to go for something. And that something is to make disciples. And the word disciple is a word you might be familiar with. If you've been around CCC or you've been a part of a church at some point in your faith journey, You might have heard the word disciple. But outside of the church, it's not a word that's used very much in our culture and context. And because of that, I think we might have a problem with how we use and define the word disciple. We've watered it down. We've taken a word with a rich history and we've made it a little more simple. We simplified it down to somebody that just believes in Jesus or attends a local church. And that's often where our understanding stops. Now, disciple didn't start as a church word. Jesus did not invent the word disciple or the idea of being a disciple. He stepped into a system that people already understood. People 2,000 years ago knew exactly what a disciple was. A bunch of other people had disciples. Other people in the Bible had disciples. Moses had Joshua. Elijah had Elisha. John the Baptist had disciples. Back then, any rabbi who was worth anything as a rabbi had disciples. This wasn't a new concept. It was a clear call to a familiar way of life. In a very basic sense, a disciple is a student of somebody. But not just a student who is sitting in a classroom taking notes. Think bigger. Think an apprentice. A disciple was and is somebody who just didn't learn information. They learned imitation. They followed closely. They watched how their teacher lived, and they began to shape their own life around it. This is life on life, not just knowledge transfer. To be a disciple meant that you were becoming like your teacher in every way. John Mark Comer is a teacher and preacher, and he recently wrote a book called Practicing the Way. This is all about the idea of discipleship. And in it, he breaks down being a disciple into 3 parts: to be with, to become like, and to do what they do. Here's how he fleshes out those things for a disciple of a rabbi 2,000 years ago. First, a disciple would be with the rabbi. The step was simple. They would spend time with the rabbi. They would eat what they ate. They would go where they went. Their schedule would begin to look like the schedule of the rabbi. This is all about proximity. The disciple was close to the rabbi. And then once they're with them enough, well, they begin to become like them. Once you spend enough time with them, you find yourselves talking like the rabbi, acting like them. Their attitude would be shaped by that of the rabbi because they were with them. Then once you became like them, it was inevitable that you would do what the rabbi did. To be a disciple meant more than just to follow and spend time with. It meant you became like them, and eventually you would do what the rabbi did. Your actions would begin to model the actions of the rabbi. You would begin to reflect them in everything you do. And if we think about a disciple as an apprentice, it makes sense to us because we have apprenticeships in our culture today. If somebody's graduating high school and wants to be an electrician, they would enter an apprenticeship with an electrician. It follows very similar steps. They have to be with the electrician. They would log hours in the van or the truck. They would have to be with the electrician, spend time with them, eat with them, talk with them, go to calls with them, carrying their bag, handing them tools. Eventually, after spending time with the electrician, the apprentice begins to become like them. And not only are they like them, but they begin to do the same things the electrician does. They tie off wires the way they tie wires off. They begin to finish their jobs the way they finish jobs. So for us, as it relates to the mission of Jesus, a disciple is someone who is to be with Jesus and then become like Jesus and then do what Jesus did. A disciple is not just someone who believes in Jesus, someone who just knows about him. A disciple is somebody who reorders their life around him, someone who is becoming like Jesus. Jesus very specifically calls us, invites us into this mission to go and make disciples. He doesn't say go and make converts. He doesn't say make people who know a lot about the Bible. He doesn't say make good people. He says make disciples. You know, trout season just opened up here in Baltimore, Maryland, just a few weeks ago. And if you were to ask me to take you fishing, I could take you fishing. I could teach you to catch trout because I know how to catch trout. But if you ask me to teach you to play the piano, well, I'm not your guy. I don't know how to play the piano. I could sit down with you at a piano and we could touch keys together and noise would come out, but you would not become a piano player because I'm not one. The reality is we cannot reproduce something we are not. We can't go and make disciples if we ourselves are not. I can't make you a piano player, just like we can't make disciples if we're not disciples ourselves, which is the whole mission. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, am I a disciple of Jesus, or do I just believe in him? See, it's important to remember that for many of us, believing is the first step. Maybe that's a step you have just taken. And if that's you, make sure you hear this. That is a huge step, but we are not designed to stay there. And this is where it gets personal for us. Before we even talk about making disciples out there, we have to ask deeper questions about what's going on in here, in our own hearts, in our own lives. Because being a disciple is not just a skill issue, it's an identity issue. For any good disciple or apprentice, their identity is wrapped up in the thing or the person that they are apprenticing. They are one and the same. We need to get real and ask ourselves if our identity is wrapped up in being a disciple of Jesus. Because the mission of Jesus starts in us before it can move through us. Before we can go and make disciples, we must first become a disciple. And we understand how identity works, because every single one of us is building our life on something. For some of us, it's what we do. For others of us, it's the people around us. It's popularity, it's success, it's relationships, it's trying to be a good person. But those things, they were never meant to, and they cannot carry the weight of who we are. They shift, and they change, and they do not hold up. But the Bible points us to something deeper. Paul says in Galatians, I have been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but he lives in me. Christ lives in me. In other words, my identity isn't rooted in me anymore. It is rooted in him. That's what it means to be a disciple. It's not just something we do on Sundays. It's not just a part of our life. It becomes who we are. It is the most important thing about us. We are someone who is with Jesus, becoming like him and doing what Jesus did. And the reality is not all of us are in the same place when it comes to becoming a disciple. Some of us are all in. Some of us are growing. Or maybe we're just curious about it. Or maybe we're just trying to figure it out. You know, we're about a month away from pool season. I know it doesn't feel like it outside right now, but how many of you are looking forward to getting into some kind of body of water this summer? Yeah, a bunch of us. Maybe it's a community pool or a backyard pool or the beach. The past few years, my family and I, we've got memberships at Mayor Pools right down the road here from CCC. And my kids absolutely love it. We get there and we check in and we grab our chairs. And the first place my kids go every single time is the slide. I still remember my son was finally old enough to ride it for the first time. For years, he had to watch his sister and myself go up and down the slide over and over again. But then he was old enough and big enough, and you would have thought it was the greatest moment of his life. And when you go to a pool, there are all kinds of people. And if you pay attention long enough, you casually find yourself somewhere in the mix. For example, first there's the locker room people. These are the people who made it to the pool. They drove there, they paid, they walked in, their towel is ready, their bag is packed, they might even have their bathing suit under their clothes, but they're in the locker room. They're kind of checking their phone, kind of just lingering there, telling themselves, like, I might go outside in a minute. They're close, but they're not actually there yet. Then you've got the lawn chair people, and you know exactly who those people are. They've claimed their spot early. Their towel's laid out perfectly, their bag is under their chair, they have a drink in their hand, sunglasses on, they're comfortable. They like the idea of the pool, but they're not gonna get in. And honestly, they probably don't plan to either. Then you're also gonna notice people, they're just kind of walking around the pool deck. These are the pool deck people. They can see everything happening. Every once in a while, somebody jumps in the pool and they get splashed, and they'll take a step back, and there's always a reason. It's like, ooh, it's too cold. Maybe later, I'm just not ready to get in the water yet. They're interested, but they're still holding back. And I'm sure you've seen like the feet in the water people. They're sitting on the edge, right? Their legs are dangling in. They're just checking out the temperature. They see other people jumping and swimming and laughing, and something in them wants that too. They'll dip a foot in, but then they'll pull back out. They're closer than they've ever been, but they're still not all the way in. And then you find the people that have pushed off the wall. They're in the pool, but they're like in the shallow end. These are the ones that are willing to get like in, but only a little bit. They still want control. There's security there. They can enjoy the water a little bit, but if something feels uncertain or it's too deep, they can just stand up. There's no risk. They're in just enough, but they never have to fully let go. Then you've got the deep end people. And these are the ones who don't even ease in. They go all in. They barely drop their towel in the chair before they are running and jumping into the pool. Make the biggest splash possible. They're fully in. They're swimming and diving and laughing, completely immersed in what the pool has to offer. There is no halfway for deep end people. They're not testing the water. They've committed to it. And that is what discipleship looks like. Fully in the deep end, no holding back. So the question is, where do we find ourselves? If the pool is a picture of what discipleship looks like, where do we find ourselves? Are we still in the locker room? Like we're not even willing to go out yet? Or maybe we're on the chair sitting on the edge of the pool. Maybe you've been in the deep end at some point, but that was a different part of your life. Maybe you're fully engaged. Maybe you are swimming in the deep end. Something happened, then it pulled you out, and you're watching other people live out what you once experienced. See, Jesus didn't call us to sit near the pool. He called us to jump in. Jesus lived his entire life on mission. Every step he took, every conversation he had, every person he stopped for was about helping people find their way back to God. He was restoring what was broken, reaching the lost, intentionally making disciples along the way. He turned with his followers, with every word he had, teaching them, and he handed them and us the same mission to go and make disciples, to not watch, to not wait, not to stay comfortable, but to go. But before we can ever make disciples, it has to start with being one. This isn't something we can fake. It's not something we casually step into when it's convenient. The mission of Jesus doesn't flow through people who are half in. It flows through people who are fully surrendered, people who are with him, becoming like him, and doing what he did. So the mission is simple, but it is not easy. It starts with us drawing a line and saying we will not follow Jesus casually anymore. He calls us to stop living on the edge, keeping control, holding something back. It's a call to step into the deep end, trust him completely, and surrender and fully say, Jesus, not a part of my life, you have all of it. So maybe this morning, if you're honest, you find yourself in the locker room, on the lawn chair, comfortable, not really engaged. Maybe you're on the pool deck. Maybe you're in the shallow end testing the waters. If that is you, maybe the step for you this morning is simple and clear: to become a disciple, to surrender to the authority of Jesus, to stop being in control and to trust him with your life, to say, Jesus, I'm not just going to believe in you, I'm going to follow you. And it starts by being with him. Maybe that means committing to being here consistently, making time with Jesus a priority, rearranging your schedule, even the rhythm of your family, so that being with Jesus is not an afterthought, it is central. Here's what this looks like for my family. We make it a point to not miss gathering together on Sundays, which means Sunday morning here as a family and Sunday evening for my daughter who's in student ministry. We schedule our life around it. It might mean we come back from a trip a day early. It means that our soccer games happen on Saturdays or Sunday afternoons so we don't miss. It means if we're up late the night before, we still gather. It means if we didn't finish our homework, we still go to church. You see, for us, it's important that we want to be with Jesus and shape our family that way. And as you're with him, something begins to change. We start to become like him. Our thoughts begin to shift. The way we respond begins to become different than the way we used to respond. The words that come out of our mouth come out differently once we're with him. Even those simple moments like sitting in traffic, we respond differently. Our priorities change. How we spend our time changes. Our finances start to reflect what matters to him. We begin to look more and more like Jesus. And then naturally, we begin to do what he did. We start to care about people in a different way. We find ourselves serving others, not just when it's easy, but when it costs us something. We notice the people we normally would overlook. You invest in people, you talk with them, you walk with them, you help other people take steps toward Jesus. You begin to make disciples just like he did. But it all starts here with surrender. It starts with choosing to step in, not halfway, not cautiously, but fully, choosing to be a disciple. And for some of us, we have been in the deep end for years. You have been a disciple. At some point in your life, you made a decision to be with Jesus, to become like him, and to do what he did. And you've been walking with him. You've been growing, and you are living life under the Son of God. And if that's you, then your step is clear. Step into the mission. Make disciples. So who are you discipling? Who are you intentionally inviting to be with Jesus with you? It starts with praying for them. Identify somebody, intentionally pray for them, but then it moves past that. It becomes someone you're walking with, investing with, and bringing them along. We live in a world that is focused on us. We love what Jesus has done for us. We celebrate it, and we should. But what Jesus did on the cross for you and for me, it changed everything. But it can't stop there. Because Jesus didn't do it just for you. He did it for your neighbor, and your teammates, for your coworker, even the one that when they walk in the room, they make you cringe a little bit. He did it for your mom and your dad and your little sister. The same grace that changed your life is meant to move through you to others. But let's be honest, that is a big ask. To go and make disciples, to help shape someone else's life. But here's what we cannot miss. Jesus never asked us to do something that he wasn't willing to do himself. He just didn't give us a command. He gave us an example. The entire time Jesus was on this earth, he was living out the mission. He was constantly inviting people in, pulling them close, doing life with them. When you read the Gospels, you see it over and over again. Jesus calling fishermen off boats, sitting around the table with tax collectors, walking dusty roads with his disciples, teaching crowds, and then pulling his disciples aside afterwards to talk about it more deeply, letting them watch him pray and serve and love and sacrifice. See, Jesus didn't just give us a command. He gave us a blueprint for how to make disciples. He showed them what it looks like to be with him, to become like him, and to do what he did. And he shows us as well. When you read the Gospels, you just don't see teachings, you see people. You see story after story of lives being changed because they were close to Jesus. Fishermen, tax collectors, outsiders, doubters. Each one with a story that now has the fingerprints of Jesus. So I wonder, whose story has your fingerprints all over it? Who do you know that because of your passion for being a disciple has started to become more like him themselves? Because if no one's life is changing because of our faith, we have to be honest enough to ask, are we missing the mission? Jesus didn't save us to make you a better version of yourself. He didn't step into your life so you could clean things up a little bit, look a little nicer, be a little kinder, have people say good things about you one day. That was never the goal. Jesus didn't save you so you could sit comfortably on the sidelines, living a safe, controlled, predictable life. He didn't rescue you so you could stay where you are. He saved you with a purpose. He saved you to send you, to step into the mission, to go into your world, your home, your workplace, your school, your team, and be someone who helps others come to know him. You weren't saved from something. You were saved for something. But if we're honest, that kind of mission, it can feel big. It can feel heavy, intimidating, even a little daunting. Like, I don't know if I can do this by myself. I don't know if I'm up for this. And the truth is, you're right. You can't do this on your own. And the good news is, you were never meant to. When Jesus gives us the mission, he also gives us a promise. He says, and surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. You're not out there alone. You're not stepping into the mission by yourself. He is with you, and that can change everything. I remember when I first started swimming, going into the deep end was terrifying. I didn't want to let go of the side. I didn't want to lose control. but I was never alone. There was always somebody with me right there in the water, guiding me and steadying me and helping me learn how to swim. And eventually, the thing that used to feel impossible is something I could do with confidence because I wasn't alone in it. And that is exactly what Jesus does for us. As you step into the deep end of following him, as you are becoming a disciple, as you begin to make disciples, Jesus is right there beside you. He is not far from you. He is guiding, strengthening, encouraging you every step. You don't have to have it all figured out. You just have to trust the one who is with you. You know, one of the ways we remember that Jesus is with us every step, week after week, is through communion. In the back of the room, you'll find some individually wrapped communion cups. You don't already have one, you can grab them. But we do this each week, not because it's a ritual, but because it's a reminder that we are to be with Jesus, to become like him, and to do what he did. And he is right there with us. Let's celebrate communion together.